Momentum just really helped me to clarify what I was offering, to build the framework, and then, do all the steps, speak to the warmest people, create the emails, and just keep showing up, which I was already doing, but in a more kind of skillful way. Having that guidance just really helped me to prioritize what actually mattered instead of, fussing around with things that felt productive but weren't really the main game. So yeah, that support helped me move.
Hi, I'm Charlene Oy, dietitian turned business and marketing coach, and you're listening to the Nutrition Business Show. Hey, welcome back to the Nutrition Business Show. Now, my guest today is Casey Conroy, and she's one of those people who has truly done it all. Casey is a naturopath, dietitian, herbalist, yoga teacher, and eating disorder clinician. And she brings all that work together into her practice at Funky Forest Health and Wellbeing. Now, Casey works in the area that not many practitioners know or talk about. She noticed that there's a lot of nutritionists and health and wellness practitioners out there working with clients in the area of eating disorders and disordered eating, but not necessarily having the training or the skills to navigate that safely. So back in February, Casey joined the Momentum Club to fill that gap she saw in the market. And within 8 weeks of her joining, she filled her first cohort with 5 clients in her founding members intake. So I've brought Casey onto the show today to share the journey of how she took her idea and turned it into a reality and is now living her dream that she's been sitting on the idea for years. And I cannot wait for you to hear Casey's story. So without further ado, let's dive into our conversation. Hey, Casey, thank you so much for coming on to the Nutrition Business Show podcast. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Yay, it's great to be here, Charlene.
Yeah, wonderful. Now, for our listeners who don't know who you are, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. So my name's Casey Conroy. I am a naturopath, a dietitian, a yoga teacher, and a credentialed eating disorder clinician. And I'm based here on Ginnaburra. I work mostly, I would say, with adults and adolescents who are navigating, eating disorders, disordered eating, chronic dieting, and usually what goes in hand with a lot of that stuff, gut symptoms. I work with a lot of neurodivergent clients as well, and mostly just people kind of navigating quite complex, I would say, relationships with, food and their body and eating and that kind of thing.
Wow, that's a lot of hats to wear, Casey. And it's so cool with the different skill sets and credentials that you bring to the table as well. What made you decide to dive into these different areas?
Yeah, well, I actually started off as a vet, so that was many lifetimes
I
ago.
didn't know
it
that.
sounds. Yeah, that was my first degree. So I think I've kind of always had like a systems thinking kind of brain, looking at the whole picture, physiology, behavior as well, patterns, and I guess with the vet degree, a fairly solid kind of medical grounding. There's a lot of medications that overlap between veterinary and human medicine too. But after I did that degree, I, did some soul searching, did some traveling as you do. And I eventually did my Masters of Nutrition Dietetics because I was just really interested in food and human health and nutrition. And then later I studied naturopathy, and I did get a lot of credit from those previous degrees, and despite that, it still took nearly a decade to complete that naturopathy degree. I was having babies and moved to the country, like life happened basically. And I guess, noticed that during naturopathy, when I was studying that degree, I kept seeing disordered eating, especially in the final year of student clinic. I kept seeing disordered eating getting missed, really, or like even accidentally reinforced in clinic. And because I was, already working in eating disorder informed kind of dietetic practice, I think I could kind of spot things that maybe the others who were there were not quite as trained to spot. So that's a little bit of how I came to this work. I do see clients, as I was mentioning before, but increasingly my work is now shifting towards supporting practitioners, so naturopaths, nutritionists, herbalists, because similar to what I saw in uni, I have time and time again kind of kept seeing very, very caring, very well-intentioned, heart-led clinicians just accidentally sometimes reinforcing disordered eating or missing it, right? With completely good intentions. And also have noticed that sometimes our clients will come into natural medicine, natural health spaces quite jaded, understandably jaded by mainstream medicine or maybe previous experiences with healthcare practitioners, and they really want to feel listened to. Of course, we all do. That makes sense. But occasionally what I've found is some of these clients are also kind of wanting to be affirmed in what might be some pre-existing disordered eating patterns. They might be seeing a naturopath because they want to cut more foods out, or they might just want some more certainty around food. And, for better or worse, natural health spaces can kind of accidentally validate that. At least that's what I've noticed. So a lot of my work now is really helping practitioners become not just more compassionate, but more nuanced and safer in how they approach disordered eating. Sorry, that was a very long-winded answer.
No, that's great. And I think it's so important with the work that you do. Not only have you got those pre-existing knowledge that you have and experiences working with clients in the eating disorder space, but now you've also moved into training other practitioners in the area as well, which, like you said, there's probably not a lot of training that they've undergone, and sometimes it doesn't stand out to them. So can you step us through, for the practitioners that are listening, what are some red flags they need to be looking at to identify if a client's got an existing eating disorder or disordered eating patterns that needs to be managed slightly differently?
Probably the biggest thing I would say, Charlene, is to practitioners would be try not to only look for the stereotypical kind of presentation, because eating disorders, disordered eating, they're very, very often kind of hiding in plain sight. They're quite invisible for the most part. So some red flags that come to mind, or at least orange flags, would be gut stuff. So IBS type symptoms, for example, bloating, food intolerances, constipation. So all of those symptoms can be caused by underfueling, and a GI tract that is, really slowed down due to that low energy availability, low stimulus of kind of the peristaltic waves. So gut stuff, also hormonal kind of conditions. So PCOS is one that I see a lot of, where it's been shown in research that there is a definite increase in disordered eating risk in people who have PCOS. So I tend to screen, or at least have my spidey senses on, when someone's coming in with that presenting kind of condition. Also, fertility issues, especially missing periods or irregular periods. That's a pretty well-known one. Other red flags could also be mental health indicators, so anxiety. And of course, that doesn't mean everyone who has anxiety has disordered eating, of course, but they will go hand in hand quite often. Neurodivergence, so ADHD, and that executive functioning difference, and, just tendency to sometimes just forget to eat. So it might not even be body image related. Autism as well. And so all of those conditions, not just the PCOS, but all those conditions I've mentioned so far, definitely have a higher risk of being accompanied by disordered eating. So those are a couple red flags, but then there's, I suppose, the things that we might see in nutrition practice as a dietitian, as a naturopath, things like very health conscious behaviours, to an intense degree, maybe even orthorexic tendencies. I'd say fear of foods or major food groups is a really big one. Carbs are usually the culprit in this day and age. Just, rigidity, cutting out foods and kind of, yeah, those would be some of the main red flags I would look for.
Yeah, these are quite common, especially the gut stuff that you mentioned as well. A lot of people struggle with gut issues. And as naturopaths, a lot of clients I work with in this area, they work with people with gut issues. And it can be really hard to pinpoint any disordered eating pattern or eating disorders. So, what are some of the things that you've seen, Casey, if someone hasn't really noticed it, a practitioner working with clients hasn't picked it up? What are some of the things that they do that can inadvertently worsen the eating disorder or disordered eating behaviors?
So I suppose affirming a client, perhaps, if they're eating a really clean diet and maybe congratulating them on that, when in actual fact, if we haven't maybe looked closely enough at nutritional adequacy, they might be under eating, sometimes to quite a large extent, even if the foods that they are eating are very, whole foods based and organic and all that kind of thing. But if they have that caloric deficit to the point where it's impacting their energy availability and the basic functioning of their body, even a very so-called clean diet might not be giving them everything that they need. And so sometimes we might accidentally find ourselves congratulating a client on eating very clean, or perhaps another one would be weight loss. So maybe a client has lost some weight, and I think just in the culture that we live in, the air we breathe is that weight loss and health are often seen as going hand in hand. Weight loss kind of is seen as equating to greater health, when in fact, one thing that I would point out is that the pursuit of weight loss is actually one of the biggest risk factors for disordered eating. And that doesn't mean that, anytime anyone comes in wanting weight loss, or who maybe they've lost weight, it doesn't mean that they have disordered eating, but it is something to get curious about rather than automatically kind of congratulate them, which again is a little bit, I think, of a tendency, in practitioners and also just people, in our society.
Okay. That's really interesting. So it's things that we may think that they are doing okay or they're doing well by eating clean, but that can also raise some further concerns. So if we do notice that someone is displaying some of those patterns, how do we bring that up in our consultation without offending the client or making it seem like we are labeling them?
Yes. Oh, that's such a good question. It's something I'm speaking about a lot with my cohort at the moment and on social media. It's a bit of a hot topic right now. So I think first you want to be really sure that you're not just kind of being biased, that you have done a bit of an assessment, a bit of a look around at their diet, and you're pretty certain that there's some maybe very irregular eating and or inadequate eating, that generally they're not quite getting enough to keep their body running optimally, whether it's intentional or not. Sometimes it's unintentional. People are just really, really busy. Or as I mentioned, some of our neurodivergent clients, they're not intentionally skipping meals to lose weight per se, but it's kind of just, it can happen, right? So if we are sure about that, or at least we've got some suspicions, I wouldn't go in and say, I think you have an eating disorder. I certainly wouldn't jump in like that, because it can be a bit of an awkward conversation, right? It's not necessarily a conversation the client has had before, maybe ever, with anyone, let alone with a practitioner. So I tend to use a fair bit of motivational interviewing in disordered eating work, and I would use a little technique known as ask, offer, ask. So the first part of that, for example, in a client who you suspect might have some disordered eating stuff or just some weird, potentially disordered patterns going on, I would first ask permission. So something along the lines of, hey, so I'm noticing that there are some really big gaps between your meals, that there's not a lot of food coming in, at least for the majority of the first part of the day. And I'm just wondering if I could say more about that, something along those lines. Or if I'm a little concerned about that, could I please speak to that a bit? And that would be the ask. Usually the client will say, sure, go for it.
Tell me more.
Tell me more. And then the offer part would be something along the lines of, from where I'm standing, I get the sense that maybe there's not quite enough energy coming in overall for your body to be functioning at its best, or whatever it is that you're seeing. And perhaps if you think it'll land okay, or the person's open to it, maybe even, adding a little bit of information. So, what we know about sensitive tummies in the case of IBS is that if there are really big gaps between those meals, there can be some extra sensitivity that starts to develop, or the gut might start to slow down and we might start to see more bloating or more symptoms. So that's the offer part. And then the final ask would be, how does that resonate with you? Or what are your thoughts on what I've just said? So that's how I would go about it, as opposed to just, plonking it on them.
Yeah, and I think that if we brought it up awkwardly, in a sense, their walls will go up immediately.
Yes.
So that can then
Yes.
create a lot of resistance to them taking on what you're about to say, and it can then break the relationship and they don't have that trust in you whatsoever. So I love the approach that you talk about, the ask for permission first, and then you can offer to give you advice. And that just helps them to open up to listen to you. So love that very practical exercise that you took us through. So thank you for stepping us through that example there, Casey. And I'm really curious, and I'm sure our listeners are really curious as well, to find out a little bit more about what kind of practitioners you take onto your mentorship program, and what is it designed to help them do or equip them with?
So I guess I'll just start by saying that I really want to change the reputation of natural health in this space, because for a pretty long time, even before I did naturopathy, I heard a lot of this kind of naturopaths, natural health practitioners, wellness, understandably. These things are dangerous for eating disorders, basically. Like they can make the situation worse. And I think that's a very fair criticism. But there are so many just very deeply caring practitioners who want to do better, and they just haven't had the training in awareness and identification for disordered eating. So I wanted to create something really practical and very real world for practitioners. And so my program is called Decide, Scope Safe Disordered Eating Practice. And it is mostly for naturopaths, herbalists, nutritionists, who are all of the practitioners who I've spoken to about this field, this kind of work, are already seeing these clients in clinic, but they don't necessarily feel fully equipped. What do I say? How do I even identify that this is happening? What language do I kind of use when I'm working with these clients? And I would say that with the course I've developed, the goal isn't to, turn someone into an eating disorder specialist or anything like that overnight, especially. It's more helping practitioners to recognize risk earlier, to know what's in their scope, because obviously naturopaths, herbalists, nutritionists are going to have a very different scope of practice to, say, a GP or an eating disorder dietitian or whatnot. And I think the main thing that I'm trying to get across with my training is to help prackies avoid causing harm and also have much safer more compassionate conversations with their clients. So we do a lot of case studies, a lot of Q&A, scripts, role playing, real consult examples, and also, a lot of the gut and neurodivergence nuance, because this stuff gets really messy in real life. So with our case studies, they're often reflective of what we would find in our practice.
Yeah, and that sounds really valuable, Casey, because oftentimes for practitioners, they are working on their own, and it's hard to have peers that could find time to, sit down and debrief on cases with you. So having this group where you're all serving the same or similar groups of people or have similar problems, and so being able to sit down and chat about that to get your support and guidance on navigating cases like that, which can be very, very complex to navigate. It's so invaluable. So, yeah, I'm so happy to see your program out there in the world, Casey. Congratulations. It must be such a big step for you, shifting your attention from working with clients to working with practitioners. How did that feel like, taking that leap for you?
It was pretty scary. I was very nervous. Yeah, because this is an idea that I've had in my head for so many years. And I did have the expertise, I guess you could say, but I just didn't have the structure. And certainly the confidence was very lacking as well. So it was scary. But I guess at the start of this year, I had a lot of personal stuff happening that kind of made me also realize that I needed to build something that was more sustainable financially. And I get overwhelmed quite easily as well. So yeah, that's where I was starting from. But yeah, I think you have helped me so much with that. A lot.
We're all only humans, and it's so natural for all of these feelings to come up when we're trying to navigate a new space. Like you said, you've got the expertise, you know what you do so well, and it's about leaping into the next season to support other practitioners with that, even with the years of experience that you have. And that's what we see with a lot of practitioners, dietitians that comes into our program. Some of them have got 20 years of experience, and all of these fears still come up as well. And how, for someone who's in that stage, in that season, they want to do something, but there is a lot of fear and overwhelm. They don't know how they're going to navigate that. What advice do you have for them?
I'm guessing that whoever's listening, also has so much knowledge in their heads, and they've got the expertise of you, as you've said, and knowing what so many practitioners in this area are like, especially dietitians. Laziness is not why we haven't started the program. It's not that. It's kind of like protecting ourselves, right? And I think many of us are very much perfectionists, so putting my hand up here, that's something that I've really been working on over the last few years. Like, I think advice-wise, I know for myself, I was always telling myself, I just need one more qualification. I have done that for 15 plus years, longer. Or I need to build the perfect website, or I need to finish the whole course first. I need to get more confident first, maybe. But I think underneath all that, we're scared, right? We're scared of being visible. We're scared of copying, crap from other people, from other practitioners. Or we're just scared of getting it wrong, and maybe scared of no one buying it, which I definitely was. I was like, oh my God, what if no one cares about this? Or even more like, what if someone does buy it and then I have to deliver it?
Yeah,
which is also
I remember the
fear.
conversation we had.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess my advice would be, don't build the whole course before you have had the conversation with other practitioners. So I would start with the problem, who are you trying to help? What are they already asking you? So for me, it's a practitioner program, but it might be a client program for other people listening. Who are you trying to help? What are they asking you? What do you want more people to understand about your area of expertise? And then what I did is just build something small, and I think for me it was quite relational. Yeah, and to try to just take the pressure off myself to make it look polished and perfect and, really sexy. The main thing I wanted was to build trust with other practitioners and for them to really understand what I stand for and that I'm hearing them and what skills they need to feel more confident with their clients with disordered eating. That's where I started, I think. Or I did once I got some guidance from you.
Yeah. Very well said. And the process that you went through as well. Thanks for sharing that, because a lot of times I think the overwhelm really comes from looking at what they are about to create or what they want to create. And we get really bogged down with, oh, I'm going to have to build X number of modules and lessons. I got to get all these texts sorted. I don't have a nice microphone, and all of the objections that we have. We just start to create so many internal conflict with ourselves, and that can just cause us to stand our way and be at a standstill and not do anything. So I love the advice that you gave around having those conversations with people, because putting an idea out there and then connecting with others on that is such an important, crucial step before you go build anything, because you want to make sure that there's people to buy it. And for you, Casey, you joined Momentum back in February. We had a conversation about it. We had your first kickoff call. You knew exactly who you want to create this program for, and you just went out there and start talking with people. And we're recording this episode in mid-May. I believe you launched your program back in April. So talk us through around that timeline. How did you go from idea to building interest for your program? You had a wait list as well. So talk us through how you got your clients that you enrolled in your program.
So just to add some nuance, I think from the outside, with me at least, it can look like, oh my God, she just built a full cohort in 8 weeks. There was some invisible groundwork underneath that. So I had been building a wait list for this course because, as I said, it was in my head. I just couldn't action it. I'd been building a wait list for about 6 months, and I'd been emailing for years. So at least a decade of emailing, podcasting on and off for about 5 years, and kind of speaking publicly about this work for a long time. So it was very fast implementation. I needed that boot to the bum to get it off the ground. But I wouldn't say it was an overnight success. I would say that up until I started Momentum, I was, very just slowly building those relationships and trust and showing up, and just talking honestly about what I was seeing in clinic. There was that kind of foundational work, but as I said, I really needed help and confidence and a way to just put my overwhelm to the side in getting it off the ground. And that's where, Momentum really, really helped me to not get overwhelmed so much by all the just little moving pieces. It helped me to stop overthinking, which is something I'm very good at, and to sequence things properly. So, to prioritize and to know what matters right now and what can wait. What is the order that I should be doing? So that was necessary. I really needed that.
Yeah. And Casey, you did a lot of that work as well. So we just gave you a little push and gave you the frameworks, the templates, the guide to help you move forward with your idea. And sometimes it's just, being able to speak with someone about the concerns that you have. And I think, these are all very valid questions that you had when you first came to our meeting about the practicalities of how to make it happen. And just being able to have that sounding board is so helpful for you to come to your own decision around what you want to launch, when you want to launch it, and even down to the specifics around pricing as well. We had a lot of discussions around that. And, something that is a B2C, business to client model that you had and transitioning to a business to business, because the work that you do is helping a practitioner get more skilled at their work and to be able to, get clients better results, that you then set it to charge more. So some of those pricing hesitations came up as well. And I don't know if you can recall how you felt at those moments when I started talking about pricing and suggesting how much to consider charging for your work there. Do you have
Yes.
any recollection of those
Oh,
feelings
yeah.
then?
Yes, yes, yes. I was very nervous. And I remember you giving me a rough range, given, what I told you I was offering and that kind of thing. And I definitely stuck to the lower end of that range because I was very nervous, but still it was more than I would have charged if I had been able to get to that point myself and charge that. But now that I'm teaching it and I can, I put so much into what I'm creating for these practitioners. And, there's the course, but there's also 6 months of monthly group calls and integration and support that I'm offering that I've layered on after it. And when I look back, I'm just like, actually, I think it's worth it. Whereas if I'd priced it
more than
lower,
worth it.
it's actually, I'm thinking, oh, that's a pretty good price. I think I would have paid that, 10 years, 5 years ago, if it hadn't, if I hadn't made it myself. So your pricing advice was really spot on, even though I definitely had that little voice in my head going, oh my God, you got to be joking. Like, no one's going to pay that.
Yeah, and one thing they always say, if the pricing doesn't scare you, that means you probably haven't charged enough, because once you got to work, you started seeing that, oh gosh, I'm pouring so much time and effort. And it's not just that, but it's the impact of your work that it can have on the practitioner as well. So that gives you a starting point. And now that you've got your first cohort, so just for everyone who's listening, Casey filled her first cohort. She had a goal of 5. And she filled that. So that was incredible. So well done, Casey, for putting yourself out there and sharing, wearing your heart on your sleeve, sharing your work with people. That's incredible achievement. And now that you have your 5 cohort, we will then look at your next intake, and your price would definitely need to go up with the second round that you're running it, now that you've got the resources and training materials developed. So talk us through your plan. So when is your next cohort happening?
Oh, thank you so much for asking. So the next cohort will kick off mid-July. So it'll be a winter for the Southern Hemisphere, winter cohort, but mid-July. But I certainly have people asking about it, which is amazing. Just people messaging me, wanting more information about the course, saying that they want to apply, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's amazing that this is happening. And I'm thinking about the second cohort already, and people are already starting to trickle in. So yeah, it's very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So if someone is interested, they can reach out to you. You've got an application form. So where can they find that?
So they can either jump on my Instagram handle, which is at naturopath.caseyconroy, and they'll pretty easily be able to find the course details, the application form from there, or they can get on my website, funkyforest.com.au, and there's a little practitioners tab at the top with all my practitioner offerings, including my free offerings. There's a few of those, but also my main training.
Awesome. I'll make sure to link that in the show notes as well, so our listeners can go find it. Now, Casey, just a couple more questions before we wrap up the episode. So first one is for someone who is listening to this, thinking about creating a program, they're considering joining Momentum. What advice do you have for them if they were worried about whether this would work for them?
Just do it. Because I remember being very torn about whether I would take the leap or not. I was in a very stressful life transition at the time that I decided to go all in. But I'm so glad I did, because this is literally something I've been dreaming of for years. And Momentum just really helped me to clarify what I was offering, to build the framework, and then, do all the steps, speak to the warmest people, create the emails, and just keep showing up, which I was already doing, but in a more kind of skillful way. And like all that might sound simple when you lay out the steps, but I think when you're inside your own business and your own nervous system is activated and you're making, decisions that, for instance, I'm the sole breadwinner for my family. So, and my nervous system is very easily activated. I think with Momentum, having that guidance just really helped me to prioritize what actually mattered instead of, fussing around with things that felt productive but weren't really the main game. So yeah, that support helped me move. And if anyone's listening and they're thinking, yeah, I can relate, then I think, yeah, probably just bite the bullet. I'm really glad that I did.
Yeah, yeah. And Casey, it's giving me goosebumps because I just love seeing the journey that you have been on and just you stepping out of your comfort zone, being bold and sharing your vision. And now you're living that dream. So it makes me so happy and so excited. It's why I do what I do. And I cannot wait to see where you take your program in the coming years. And to do this as well, Casey, I must say that you've got little ones. So it's not like you've got all the time in the world. So a lot of practitioners or listeners are the same as well. They've got a lot on their plate and their life is full. Any tips around time management, or how did you even find time out of your busy mom schedule to do all of this?
I will be real. It's been very messy and imperfect, and there have been some late nights. There have been some, kids telling me, "Okay, mom, it's 9 o'clock. It's bedtime now." I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Yes, it's time to get off." But the way I see it is that I am in a phase where this hard work is building something that I can then use time and time again in the future, and I won't have to do this intense building phase again. I'll be tweaking, obviously, and continually improving. But yeah, I do want to be honest that, there is work involved, but it's work that comes from my heart. So for me, it's just like, okay, I'm going to do this. It's not a chore. It's hard work at times, but it's not something that, I'm just hating. I love what I do. And yeah, I think the main thing is Momentum just helped me turn all the groundwork that I've done into an actual offer and an actual launch. And as far as time management, I honestly just, I don't even know what I could offer there besides just give your kids extra cuddles when you can, and know that this phase is temporary and that we're building intentionally.
Yeah, so beautifully said. It's only a season and this season will pass. It's always hard, it's like when you're building a house, you're doing all that groundwork and people are looking at it going, why is it moving so slow? But all of those groundwork, the foundation work, is so important because then you have a really strong, solid business that you're building from the ground up, that you have good systems in place, you've got a great offer, that it's validated. So you just repeat, rinse and repeat, just launch and sell and set up all the funnels after this. And so, yeah, it's only a temporary season. And as long as you are focused on what you're building and know that this will bring you, all the hard work will pay off in the years to come. And you're doing this for your kids as well. So it's not like you're sitting there watching TV, Netflix for 2 hours each night. You're doing something productive with your time, and you'll get that TV time back if that's what you enjoy doing, right? Like that will be for later. So Casey, in terms of business or mindset wise, do you have any advice for our listeners on how to navigate building a business as a mum?
My biggest advice would be, don't abandon your values to build your business. So, I do see a lot of online business advice that teaches a lot of like hustle, hustle, hustle and urgency and pressure and, constant visibility, constant growth, constant selling. And some of that can work for people for sure. But for me, the question that I come back to is is usually, does this feel like the kind of relationship that I want to build with my people? Especially, I think, in health and nutrition, we're often working with people who have already been shamed or, sold to or pressured or made to feel like they're failing. So I think with the marketing, that has to be part of our ethics, which, doesn't mean we never sell what we're offering, of course, but it doesn't mean we, just hide in a cave and people just psychically know what we have to offer. But for me, I think it just means we communicate clearly and consistently. We make really genuine invitations. I don't like to manipulate people's fear to get them over the line. So I think build trust. Building trust is important. Send the emails, share what you're thinking, let people see your values, and talk about the problem before you talk about your program. And one other thing I would say is don't underestimate slow growth, like really slow relational values-led growth. It's not going to make the sexiest Instagram kind of headline, but I think that it builds a more solid business. I think I would just say you don't have to become like a pushy internet kind of hustler goblin to make money. Thank God, there are other ways. You can still build something very sustainable and very, very you.
I love that advice. Thank you so much for sharing that, Casey. I think especially the fact about marketing ethically and not losing sight of your values, because there are many, many ways to make money and you can get there fast. You can get there at a pace that's slow and sustained. And you can do that in a way where it's aligned with your values and the season of life that you're in. Oftentimes I have people ask me, how quickly can I make 6 figures? Sure, like what we give you, the tools, the training that we develop can help you get to 6 figures. But we also need to make sure that we're doing it in a way that doesn't burn us out, that's still beautifully aligned with the season that we're in, so that you can still continue to fulfill your role as a parent or in your other jobs that you have, and do that in a way that sits nicely with where you're at in life. So thank you so much for that advice. It's very grounded, and I love your approach to working with clients, working with practitioners as well. So thank you so much once again, Casey, for coming on to the show. Before you go, is there any other final words of wisdom for our listeners?
You can run your business your way and in alignment with your values. And you can be a heart-led practitioner, absolutely, and still run a business and support your family. I think for a very long time I saw them as diametrically opposed. Like, you can't make a good, income and also be doing it ethically. How is that possible? But I'm starting to see that it's absolutely possible and kind of necessary, actually, for at least in my situation, my life phase. So
yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much, Casey, for your time and your wisdom, your wise, kind words and advice once again. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in this week. I hope you have a beautiful week ahead. I'll catch you back here for next week's episode. Take care.